Hey everyone, welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Miss Yashasvini R, founder of Culturelytics, AI platform to measure organizational culture and its financial impact. Hey Yashasvini, welcome to ELI.
Thanks for inviting me.
I'd request you to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Sure. My name is Yeshasvini. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I have about 20 years of experience in the trade. And if I were to bucket my experience, I think it'll largely be three different areas. I think the first being as a senior HR leader in the industry. The second would be when I set up a small incubation fund for student entrepreneurs, which went ahead to incubate about 46 companies and create about 2,000 direct jobs. So I've managed that. And as a serial entrepreneur, this would be my fourth business. I started my entrepreneurship journey about 12 years ago. So lots to reflect on in this interview.
Awesome. We will start with understanding what culturelytics is all about and what is the problem statement, what value it is giving to the customers, and then we will go into your journey as an entrepreneur.
Sure. So Culturelytics, as the name suggests, has got to do everything about analytics and culture. We believe, and we've been told that now by quite a number of people, to say that we are the world's first artificially intelligently powered platform that not only defines culture. When I say culture, it's organization culture in a very comprehensive framework, but is also able to baseline and score culture. So we have our own proprietary score called the Culture Coherence Quotient. And we've gone ahead and drawn some correlations between the CCQ and the financial performance of the business. So we're now able to go ahead and actually give the management the dollar impact of culture on the business. And that's a huge game changer. Because primarily, there are a couple of issues that the industry is facing today, especially if you look at the mergers and acquisition industry. It's a $4.7 trillion industry, and you'll be surprised that more than 70% of the deals fail. And this is global. Of course, there are other reasons for failure, but when you dig in, when you research, you find that culture seems to be the number one reason why deals are failing. And that's got to do with incompatibility, just the integration is not done very efficiently. So we come into that space. So we're advocating a new practice called culture due diligence, in addition to your existing practices of financial due diligence and legal and commercial due diligence. We're just advocating a practice where the leaders can be proactive and take decisions on the target company they want to acquire, have more insights into the integration efforts, and so on. So that's primarily the largest problem that we're trying to solve. And of course, the fact that we have a platform like this makes work around organization culture and work environments very interesting. So we have a whole suite, right, from chatbots, helping organizations become listening organizations, having a pulse of an employee sentiment, onwards to the mergers and acquisition space that I spoke to you about.
How do you measure a very complex uh, entity such as a culture? Uh, it's very difficult to put a linear scale to a such a multidimensional concept. For example, some companies are very aggressive in terms of their culture. Some companies are liberal in terms of their culture, and both the companies are right in their industry. So based on industry and based on the country, the culture differs. How do we put a linear scale to it?
I think that's a great question, and thanks for asking that. I don't think we put a linear scale to answer that. So, the whole premise of our model is that we don't go into organizations trying to tell them whether you have a right culture or a wrong culture. That's really not our job. Our job is, to assist the organization see whether their culture is aligned to what they want to achieve. I mean, so is their organization behaving and displaying certain characteristics to accelerate that desired change? And the change can be anything. We've had clients who were very clear that they want to be a debt free company in X number of years. So, cost saving was extremely important from a culture standpoint, in addition to high revenue growth. It's, and to give you an analogy, um, it's like trying to lose weight, right? So let's assume that I want to try and lose weight. That supposes that you should drink water, you should exercise, you should have an active lifestyle. It's very similar to that. So let's say an organization wants to imbibe a digital mindset so that their product innovation accelerates and they're able to increase customer base in the market and increase their market leadership position. And that presupposes a lot of their employees are comfortable with technology, are lateral thinkers, they have an agile workforce. So what we go ahead and do is to define culture from two perspectives. One is the inside out, which is the employees talking about the organization. We do a very deep value assessments to figure out the DNA or the personality of the company, and so on and so forth. But we also have the outside in view, which is that we do a lot of natural language processing. We look at the reputation of the organization. Mind you, all of this is from a culture lens, right? So we are able to bring in a fair amount of validation, and that's huge credibility. So tomorrow, if I'm able to go ahead and tell the client to say, your CCQ or your culture clearance quotient, which is typically a score on 100, is roughly, say, about 69 or 70 or thereabouts, we're now able to very confidently advise the client to say, hey, listen, you want to bring in this change, but it's not going to be as easy as you envisioned. And because people are not really collaborating and talking to each other, the undercurrents may be high, there may be a lot of silos. Your revenue risk or whatever that you have projected as business growth may be at an X% risk, which is huge because it kind of changes the conversation. It takes culture away from a soft, touchy feely issue. The moment you're going to put a dollar impact on it, everybody sits up and takes notice, which they should, and rightly so, because culture is so much more than just HR practices and so on and so forth.
Okay. Many of our listeners are early stage entrepreneurs, and when you're at early stage, culture isn't the biggest priority for you because you are trying to assemble multiple things together to make a profitable business. What did you say to these entrepreneurs about culture? How does it impact to their venture?
Yeah, I mean, slight disagreement there, because if you kind of see the success of startups, 90 to 95% of them fail. And your thumb rule is whether they're able to survive the 1,000 day. So if they're able to survive the 1,000 day rule, then you know pretty much that this is something that's going to stay. And again, no surprises. The biggest derailer of startups is culture. Because and why do I say that? I think the most common example is partner conflict, isn't it? When say four friends, five friends get together. They have to raise money. They have to negotiate with the client. It's some pretty real conversations, and if your values are not aligned and your culture is not a culture that promotes collaborative effort, that promotes transparency, then you may have a great idea and nobody said no to that, but it's the people at the end of the day who execute on that idea, right? And it's the people who have the resilience. Like, who knew the pandemic is going to stretch for such a long time, and yet you're having people going about their jobs, being resilient, waking up every single day. I mean, and this all goes back to the fabric that you build in your workforce. So culture, I think, is extremely mainstay, and you should invest on it right from the beginning.
Okay. Speaking of investing in culture, Yashaswini, let's say we are able to measure our culture and we think there is a gap which we need to fill by making investments. How do we change the culture, or how do we align it to our end goals? Uh, because cultures are the most permanent things in a organization. They're very hard to change.
Absolutely. A couple of contexts to that, right? I may join a company for money, but I'm going to stay back for its culture. Similarly with the client, I may give you an order because uh, you know you got a competitive price out there, but I'm going to continue to do business with you because of the relationships, because of the ethics, because of the culture of customer relations that you maintain with me. So culture is pretty much mainstay. Even in our framework, one of the most critical dimensions is something that we call as influencer network. And we found that to be an extremely impactful dimension where we do an organization network analysis, the ONA. So it's based on that framework. And we're able to identify your influencers, your informal network within the organization. And that's extremely powerful, right? Because you have your formal organization chart, and let's say you have 14,000 employees, 20,000 employees, but that if you are in doubt, you will go and approach your most trusted friend in the organization, and identifying the employees who enjoy a high amount of trust and influence within the organization becomes paramount. And our platform does that. And not surprisingly, whenever we run this, we have found people at not very senior levels, though, I must say, because the assumption is, I'm in a very senior role, probably the C-suite, and hence I enjoy high influence. And not surprisingly, we've seen relatively junior folk, having high influence. And we know that they are the people that we should engage with. Because if I want to bring in the change and accelerate that, these people will be the pool of people who are going to have crucial conversations with the rest of our employees. So we do have, so if you look at our framework, we have 8 very crucial dimensions. And like I mentioned, influencer network is one of them, but probably the easiest to implement.
Well, now we will get into the journey of entrepreneurship that you have taken to build
Okay.
such an interesting venture and solve a interesting problem for companies. Now, tell us, when did you think of becoming an entrepreneur? When this uh, the gene of entrepreneurship came to you?
Well, like I said, my first entrepreneurship journey was 12 years ago. That was my first startup. And I don't think I had a big vision to say, I'm going to do X, I'm going to do Y. I think we all make mistakes and learn through the process. Um, and I've had a very good journey. I think I've been blessed in so many ways. For me, I think it was about solving problems. And the more complex they are, the more excited I would get. And because I come from a people management HR kind of a background, I think it was but natural. No surprises that I started off with an HR consulting firm, and we very quickly graduated into management consulting, which was a huge change because I moved from facilitating mid-level manager workshops to employee policies to actually negotiating with trade unions. And so I think it's the diversity and the richness of experience that you get in consulting. I think is so difficult when you compare it to other professions. So I've learned a lot, and what keeps me going as the entrepreneur is it's like uh, a puzzle that you're trying to solve, which has different pieces. I don't think money has been on my mind ever, but money is always an outcome of the plan that you put together. And I've made my share, but I've never chased money.
How did you find the right people to take your vision forward or build the product you want to along the way?
Well, that's a great question, and that's again a culture question, right? The founding team becomes important. I think values. How did I find them? Is one thing that I've always believed is when you meet an interesting person, and when you have an interesting conversation, always remember them. You may not have a role for them today, but you will definitely tomorrow. So I have this note that, okay, I met this person there, I met that person there, and I keep collecting all of these names. So I think putting together a team for me um, is not so much of a challenge anymore, simply because I've spent 20 years in interacting with some of the brightest minds across the world. I think the key is clarity. If you are clear about what is the problem you want to solve, and you believe that you're getting experts who will help you solve the problem. So, clarity of mind with a mindset of genuine collaboration, I think, is the key to successful founding teams. It can be any business model whatsoever. I mean, even if you look at my journey, right? I just had an idea, but over the last 12 years, through my own companies, and this being the fourth one, I would have created close to about 900 jobs through my own companies. And look at the multiplier effect that it has. And I I think the key to it is absolute uh, uh, clarity of thought, being simple minded. Don't let ego play spoil sport. I feel egos are such a waste of time.
Now that you have reached a point where you are making impact to different companies and you have built a good product as well, what is the way forward? What is the vision you have as an entrepreneur?
I think I want to scale it. I think the point at which my business is Culturelytics is at right now is that the concept is validated. You see, Culturelytics being in the area of culture, which is so soft. It's very concept heavy. It's very IP heavy. So I think the biggest milestone for us was to reach validation. Where the customers, it is a problem we understand, but do the customers really want to solve this problem? And if they want to solve this problem, how is it going to benefit them to then grow their business? So we had to seek customer validation, and I'm very happy to say that we've reached that point. So now that we've built a good a track record, a small one though, of how we've helped customers in this culture journey, I think now it's all about scale. It is a global model, and we've already gone ahead and delivered a few projects in the United Kingdom and Australia. We're trying to enter into the US market. I think from now on, it's going to be at scale.
What are some of the biggest challenges you have faced along the way while building this venture and while building other ventures of yours?
Well, I think an entrepreneur life the other word for it is challenges, isn't it? You
Absolutely.
know, um, it's not easy. You have to persevere. The kind of challenges that I have faced, though, have been both personal and external. I think you also learn a lot. Uh, and I'm a very self reflective person. So I tend to internalize a lot of these learnings. I think for me, I faced a few barriers around handling money. I was not very used to it, doing the taxes, having a good conversation with my chartered accountant, trying to understand how to plan finances in the initial years. That took some time. Of course, confidence, your ability to say no and mean it. And I think for me it was and being mind you, I started in 2008 and 9, and at that time it was not as fashionable today as it's today to be in the startup world. And the gender issue was not as mainstream as it's today. So I have faced challenges, both on gender, a lot of biases, and then I realized that it's not so much about the external environment, but it's how, as an entrepreneur, you're able to learn from it, and how you're able to modify yourself to tackle those challenges, because challenges will remain. And I think from a skill standpoint, it's everything, because you're always dealing with multiple tasks in one day. You have your chartered accountant, then you have your tax consultant, you have your own HR manager, you have a project delivery. You're also always constantly developing the business, so you're pitching to your clients all the time. So it's a multifunctional role, and you have to get used to it. And I think it can get a little overwhelming if you don't align your personality to the needs of the job.
Speaking of the gender, I have an interesting question for you. And since you are from culture background, you can answer it better than anyone else. Can you tell us how does it affect if you are a entrepreneur who is also a woman? How does a woman entrepreneur differ from a entrepreneur who is a man?
I can write a book about this. I don't think half an hour is going to be enough. It's a very broad question that you've asked, right? So let me try to contextualize this a little bit more. I think in terms of problem solving, in terms of thinking a little differently, I think women have an edge, because I think we're used to multitasking from our childhood, and this comes from a very Asian context of family and upbringing, right? Um, from uh, from the stereotype and the bias, I think it's almost always assumed that we're not very good in finance and numbers. Because my biggest uh, irritation, if I were to call it that, in the initial years, where the moment I would say I'm an entrepreneur, and even now, so they look at me and they say, "Oh, interior design," and I'm like, "No." And they say clothes, and I'm like, "No." So there are already certain stereotypes saying that if you're a woman and you're an entrepreneur, then these probably would be the areas that you would be doing. Uh, Yoga, nutrition, you know and when I say no, I'm in the area of artificial intelligence. I'm deals. It's about mergers and acquisitions, and it's about financials and all of that. They're kind of taken aback. So there are stereotypes that we still face. Um, and we've made a lot of progress, mind you. And I think the urban conversations are vastly different today for the women than your semi-urban rural landscape. And I think from an industry standpoint, the ITES industry, traditionally banking already had a lot of women employees. Um, So those conversations were always there. Among the new industries, I think the IT has been a great leveler. But if you look at other traditional industries, for example, manufacturing, these issues are still there.
Can you tell us about one tough decision you had to make along the way?
As an entrepreneur,
Yes.
so many, right? Um, it's all about decisions and moving on. I mean, this um, saying no to a client, for example, because you know that the money is good, maybe, but that's not the client that you want to deal with, because I don't think businesses are ever built on a premise of money for the sake of money. Letting go of some of your people because it's not working out. um, Trying to restructure your finance. So it's decisions. It's decisions, and I think you have to take decisions. And I see that the more you're going to delay and prolong it, the more complicated you're going to make it. So I have now learned that take a decision, take an informed decision, and then navigate it, and life moves on.
Can you give us some examples of failures you have gone through as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Any entrepreneur who says I've not failed is probably not an entrepreneur, right? So I see, from a failure standpoint, there's always been a project that we could have won that we lost. Um, the problem I have is the word failure, because I think as a personality, I'm known to be extremely resilient amongst my community, and that's probably a reputation I enjoy. So I'll always take it as a step back, and I will look at it to solve it in a different way. I seek help. So I really wouldn't say there has been a failure, because failure assumes that I've given up. Right? I don't think I've ever given up. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. You have to accept. You have to bite the bullet and move on. Um, but you have to move on, and I think that's testimony to why I'm still excited about my fourth startup, and why I've been at it now for about 12 years.
What is the meaning of entrepreneurship to you?
Solving problems.
Um, Now, coming to the final question, you have to tell us what are the learnings you have gathered so far so that we can take away and apply it to our ventures.
For startups,
Yes.
well, I think first is understand why you want to become an entrepreneur, because I think the current environment is so positive. And thanks to people like yourselves, you help us communicate stories, which I wish I had in 2008 when I was starting off, right? Um, but it's a very conducive environment, and it's a positive environment. But entrepreneurship should not be an excuse. And I see a lot of youngsters just say, let's start this, and they're not very serious about it. So first, really understand, why is it that you want to become an entrepreneur? The second is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Because I see a lot of them chasing fundraising. I raised 500,000, or I raised 1 million, or uh, and that's good, but please understand that when you raise money, you're also accountable to your investors to return that money, and return that money at a rate probably much higher than what the banks are offering you. Otherwise, you could have gone ahead and taken debt, and not necessarily raised money from the market. Don't dilute too much of your company early on. So this whole fundraising. So first, if I were to categorize it, clearly have an answer to why you want to become an entrepreneur. And second, go about fundraising in a very informed way. Don't get swayed away by a $1 million ticket, because the terms and conditions that a $1 million check may have may just kill the company, or may force you to build a company that you never wanted to build in the first place. So I think these two aspects are important. And thirdly, have a very open mind. I think as an entrepreneur, you need to be a great listener. Um, because at the end of the day, you're taking decisions and solving problems, and you have to carry people along. So you have to listen well. You have to have a huge amount of patience. You have to be humble. And at the end of the day, enjoy it, because it's the choice you've made. And if you're not enjoying it, it's fine. Just get out of it and get yourself a job. You're not a failure or anything. You're just, it's like cooking, right? Not all dishes that you cook turn out to be really well. So what? It's life. It's life. So um, be absolutely, what do I say? Have fun. It's one life that you have. Keep experimenting. Don't take yourself too seriously, but take the idea and the problem that you want to solve seriously.
Seriously, it was a pleasure hosting you and listening to you. And thanks for the lessons you have given us about people and culture. Thanks for your time, Yashaswini, and our best wishes for Culturelytics.
Thank you, and I wish you all the very best. I will tune into your stories. It's a great initiative, and I too wish you all the very, very best.